The sky wept over the cemetery that morning, heavy clouds rolling in like waves of sorrow. Rain fell in steady sheets, soaking the earth and turning the stone paths into slick ribbons of grey. Robert knelt by the grave without an umbrella, his coat clinging to him like a second skin, drenched and cold. He didn't flinch when the thunder rolled in the distance or when drops splashed against his face. His fingers rested gently on the name etched into the smooth marble headstone, Emily Grace Whitmore. Beloved wife, forever missed. It had been 1 year to the day since she was taken from him in a car accident that made no sense. Just one moment there, the next, gone. Every Sunday since, he'd come to this spot beneath the willow tree, whispering stories, apologies, memories, anything to feel closer to the woman he loved more than life itself. Today felt different, though. He wasn't sure why. Maybe it was the way the willow swayed against the wind, or maybe because the ache in his chest had grown heavier with the passing days. "I still don't know how to breathe without you," he murmured, his voice nearly swallowed by the rain. "Everything's quiet now. The house in my heart, even the birds don't sing the same." He bowed his head, forehead resting on the cold stone, wishing that somehow, through the veil between life and death, Emily could hear him. Then a voice cut through the hush of the storm. "Did you love her that much?" Robert looked up, startled. A boy stood a few feet away, maybe 11 or 12, wearing a soaked hoodie and carrying a worn-out backpack. His eyes weren't mocking or nosy. They were sincere, even tender. "I didn't mean to bother you," the boy said quickly, stepping back.
"It's just I come here sometimes too."
"To think. And I saw you crying and... I don't know. I guess I never saw someone love that hard before." Robert blinked, unsure of what to say. He hadn't spoken to anyone here in months, not beyond a brief nod to the groundskeeper. "Finally," he said quietly, "she was my entire world." The boy nodded slowly. "I hope someone cries for me someday too," he said, almost to himself. There was such a quiet yearning in his words, a kind of loneliness Robert recognized all too well. "What's your name?" Robert asked. "Tyler," the boy replied, hugging his backpack. "I come here when I feel alone." Robert studied him for a moment. Something about the boy's presence, his openness, cracked the hardened shell around Robert's grief. "You're not alone, Tyler," he said after a pause. "Not anymore." And for the first time in a long while, the rain didn't feel so heavy. The grave still stood silently beneath the willow, but beside it now stood the smallest flicker of connection. Two strangers linked not by blood or circumstance, but by the ache of absence and the hope that love, even broken, could still be shared. Sundays took on a new rhythm after that rainy day. Tyler began showing up regularly, his presence quiet but warm, like the first light after a storm. Sometimes he brought wildflowers from the side of the road, wrapped in rubber bands. Other times, he brought small drawings, crayon sketches of trees, hearts, or imagined versions of Emily based on the faded photo etched onto the headstone. Robert never asked him to come, but he was always glad when he did. There was something about Tyler's unfiltered curiosity, his gentle questions, that softened the ache in Robert's chest. The boy didn't treat grief like a disease. He treated it like something real, something you could sit beside without fear. Robert found himself talking more as the weeks passed. At first it was just pieces, little stories about Emily's laugh, her habit of singing off, key when she cooked, how she could never pass a dog without stopping to say hello. Tyler listened like each word was a treasure. He never interrupted, just absorbed the stories like sunlight through glass. One Sunday, Robert brought a thermos of cocoa and offered Tyler a cup. The boy smiled wide, cradling the cup in both hands like it was the finest thing in the world. "Did she make cocoa like this?" he asked. Robert chuckled softly. "Better? She added cinnamon and called it her magic potion for bad days." Tyler grinned, eyes crinkling with delight. "I wish I'd met her," he said. "I think we'd have been friends." The thought warmed Robert in a way he hadn't expected. "She would have adored you," he said truthfully. The wind rustled the willow leaves above them, casting shadows that danced like whispers. After a moment of silence, Tyler asked, "Do you think love like that can happen again? Or is it just once, and then it's gone?" Robert looked at the grave, then at the boy beside him. It was a hard question, one he'd asked himself 100 times in sleepless hours. "I don't know," he admitted. "But I don't think love really ends. I think it just changes shape. It stays with you even when the person's gone." Tyler nodded slowly, then looked away, kicking gently at the damp grass. "My mom left when I was 5. I don't remember her much, and my dad's always working. Sometimes I think maybe people just stop loving each other." His voice was small but steady. Robert felt something shift inside him, a deep understanding of that kind of ache. Not the loss of someone who died, but the emptiness left by someone who chose to disappear. "Love doesn't always look the way we expect," Robert said gently. "But it's still real. And showing up for someone, that's one of the purest forms it takes." Tyler didn't respond right away. He just looked up at the willow, then at the grave, then at Robert. "Thanks for letting me come here," he said. Robert nodded. "Thanks for helping me remember her." And as the two sat quietly under the tree, it became clear that love had found a new shape, one made of shared stories, silent company, and the quiet rebuilding of broken hearts. The days grew shorter, and autumn crept into the cemetery with golden leaves and a quiet chill. Robert noticed Tyler's footsteps crunching through the fallen foliage before he saw him. The boy arrived with a folded piece of paper, his usual backpack bouncing against his shoulders. His face was different today, serious, thoughtful. "I wrote something," he said, holding out the paper. Robert took it gently, recognizing the uneven handwriting and crayon-smudged edges. Tyler shifted from foot to foot, almost nervous. "It's for her. For Emily." Unfolding the paper, Robert read the simple message, "Dear Emily, thank you for loving Mr. Robert so much. He misses you, but I think I help a little now. I hope you're happy in the sky. Love, Tyler." The words hit like a wave, stealing the breath from his lungs. He hadn't cried in weeks, but now tears welled up without resistance. "She would have loved this," Robert whispered, pressing the paper to his chest. It wasn't just a letter. It was a bridge between grief and healing. They decided to bury the letter together. Tyler picked a small stone beside Emily's grave, and Robert helped him dig a shallow space. Gently, they tucked the letter beneath the soil, placing the stone on top like a quiet secret. "Do you think she can read it?" Tyler asked, brushing dirt from his hands. Robert smiled through his tears. "If love travels through time and space, and I believe it does, then yes." She read every word. That night, Robert pulled Emily's old journal from the bookshelf. It had sat untouched for over a year, its leather cover collecting dust like the rest of their shared life. He opened it slowly, half expecting her scent to rise from the pages. With a shaking hand, he began to write. "Today, a boy reminded me that grief is proof of love. That healing doesn't mean forgetting. And that love, when shared, multiplies instead of fading. The act of writing unlocked something in him. Memories poured out, not with the heaviness of sorrow, but with warmth. He wrote about Tyler, his quiet strength, his awkward jokes, his resilience. About the way this boy, who barely knew him, had reached into the hollow of his loneliness and filled it with presence. And as Robert wrote, he felt Emily's spirit more clearly than he had in months, not as a ghost haunting him, but as a quiet force urging him forward. The next Sunday, Tyler arrived to find Robert waiting with 2 mugs of warm cocoa, cinnamon and all. "Magic potion," he said with a wink. Tyler's grin stretched ear to ear. They didn't visit a grave that day. They visited a friend. Emily's grave had become something more than a place of mourning. It was now a meeting point for 2 wounded hearts finding comfort in shared stories, silent understanding, and the invisible threads that stitched people together. And beneath that small stone where the letter rested, love continued to grow, quiet, steady and true. Years passed as years always do, quiet and unstoppable. The cemetery changed little. Trees grew taller, headstones weathered slightly, and the seasons continued their dance of color and cold. But the people who visited changed, as people are meant to. One bright spring afternoon, sunlight filtered through the branches of the willow tree, casting delicate shadows over the familiar grave. The stone was still smooth, the name still lovingly carved, Emily Grace Whitmore. But now, 3 figures approached it, not just one. Tyler, no longer a boy but a young man in his 20s, walked slowly, carrying a bouquet of soft, yellow daisies. Beside him was a woman, his wife, Lena, with warm eyes and a calm presence. In front of them skipped a little girl with wild curls and flowers in her hair. She giggled as she danced through the grass, twirling in the breeze. "Daddy," she asked, looking up at the headstone. "Who's this lady?" Tyler crouched beside her, placing the bouquet down with careful hands. His voice was steady but touched with emotion. "She's the reason I know what love looks like." Lena rested her hand on his shoulder as he stood and brushed the grass from his jeans. "When I was your age," he continued, "I met someone who had lost someone very special, and instead of pushing me away, he let me stay. We talked, we cried, and we remembered someone beautiful together." The little girl tilted her head, curious. "Was he your daddy?" she asked. Tyler smiled softly. "No, sweetheart, but he loved me like a father does." His gaze drifted toward the willow, where a silver-haired man sat quietly on a bench nearby, watching. Robert. He had aged, but his eyes still held that steady warmth. He gave Tyler a small nod, nothing more than a gesture, but it carried the weight of years, of memories, of love that refused to fade. Tyler approached him after the visit. "She would have loved them," he said, nodding toward Lena and the child. Robert's smile was small but full. "She already does," he replied. The 2 sat in silence, the same way they used to all those years ago. There was no need for words. Grief had brought them together, but love had kept them connected. As they prepared to leave, the little girl looked back one last time at the headstone under the willow. Her voice, sweet and soft, carried in the wind. "I hope someone cries for me someday too," she said, echoing the words her father had once spoken when he was just a lonely boy in the rain. Tyler knelt beside her. "If you love people deeply," he said, brushing her hair back gently, "they will always remember. That's what matters most." The breeze whispered through the trees, and the light around Emily's grave seemed to glow just a little brighter. Love, once buried beneath sorrow, had blossomed again, stronger, deeper, and carried forward by a new generation. Full circle.